Investment reporting is an issue in the industry, and it's a very complex process. And I've got Laven Chetty here, CEO of Global Investment Reporting, a company that specializes in investment reporting to financial services in general. And Laven's going to clue us in a little bit about the challenges that are in that space and what sort of technology solutions are available to pension funds. Laven, good morning.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to be here.
So, Laven, explain to us the difference between the traditional way of investment reporting and the new way using technology solutions, please.
Yeah. So, traditionally, the compliance reports have been prepared by the retirement fund administrators, where they collect all of the Excel IB schedules from the underlying asset managers, and they manually try and put all of this information together into one report. So you can imagine it's quite a tedious process and quite time consuming and very manual from that perspective. So basically, the new way of doing it is to actually gather the instrument level holdings from the asset manager, put all of that into a system, and then create a consolidated view of the investment holdings. So that way, when you're applying it into the regulatory reporting, you know that all the instruments have been matched together and the instruments have been consolidated. So when you're testing against compliance, you're actually testing the right exposures for compliance purposes.
So traditionally, it's a job that's done by most administrators as part of the administration process. And what's the problem with that?
Yeah, so if you look at it traditionally, the administrators have been given this task purely because they consolidate other investment values. And the administrators themselves may not necessarily have the skills, the resources, or the systems to be able to do investment level reporting. Their focus is mainly on member level and fund level reporting and not necessarily the investment reporting. So we now have a situation where the administrators now have to try and understand what is a derivative and how do you classify an option or a future, which is not currently part of their repertoire in terms of their scope of work. So we have a situation where these administrators are now trying to put investment reports together, not really understanding the full impact of what the compliance impact may be. And this may actually cause more serious issues further down the line for the retirement fund.
That makes sense. So Laven, I believe there's been some new changes to legislation that's introducing a whole host of new aspects to the industry. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yes. So, there's a few major changes to Regulation 28. The first being the infrastructure. So previously there was no infrastructure category within the compliance reporting. So the National Treasury and the FSCA has now introduced infrastructure. So instruments now have to go through a further classification on whether or not they are infrastructure. And then there's a table, a new table 2, which has been included, where the instruments, the top 20 instruments of the infrastructure need to be disclosed. So in addition to that, there is also an issuer and entity level exposure limit being at 25%. Previously, this was limited just to your cash and fixed income asset classes, but now it's being applied across all asset classes. So if you have an equity instrument that also has cash and a fixed income instrument behind it, all of that now needs to be less than 25%. And the other more important change has been that audit certificates, where funds previously were being checked by their own auditors for being compliant and could issue an audit certificate to a retirement fund, these audit certificates have been taken away because the FSCA and National Treasury believe that a fund should know their full exposures, and therefore full look-through reporting is now required on all portfolios.
Right. So Laven, just in terms of your question, a previous question, why are the regulators looking for full look-through reporting?
Yeah, so it's actually quite interesting because, when you look at a fund that's received the Reg 28 audit certificate, you don't actually know what's inside of that fund. And so the regulators are now saying, in order for a retirement fund to be able to understand the risk within that fund, to be able to measure things like liquidity risk, market risk, currency risk, geographic risk, they need to be able to see what the instruments are. And this also enables the fund to do their own independent risk assessment, as well as perform stress testing and also understanding the full impact of a situation like a Steinhoff to see what their physical exposures are in the fund. And by also doing a full look-through reporting, you now know exactly what your holdings are, and you can also apply your ESG, your environmental, social, and governance reporting, and you can even go down to the level of trying to see what your carbon emissions are for a particular stock, because now you know what your exposure is to that stock.
Laven, how does technology change the dynamics of this process?
Okay, so if we look at the current process for reporting to the regulators, this is all done on a post-trade at a point in time. And so you would collect all of the data based on that specific period, and you would put a report together. But this doesn't help the industry where they are doing face-to-face meetings with clients, and the funds that they're choosing for a retirement annuity or preservation fund, they need to know there and then if that fund is compliant. So GIR has created an API that is able to then look at all of the underlying data. And so when the advisor is sitting in front of a client and they've selected their portfolios and the percentages, and once they click submit, that comes to GIR, does a background check, and tells the client whether the solution they've selected is compliant or not. If it's not compliant, the advisor can then tweak the allocations until they get to something that is compliant. So this saves a lot of time and effort from the advisor side going back and forth to clients when they're doing a manual check, because there is no system to be able to check this real time. So with GIR's system, this can now be done more efficiently as opposed to the manual process going back and forth.
Got that. Thank you. Great. Very interesting. Laven, very appropriate for these times, obviously with ESG being a massive focus. And I would really like to thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And take care. We'll chat again soon.
Thank you very much.